Welcome to our episode of Biblical Archaeology from the Ground Down. Sponsored by Bible Interact and hosted by Dr. George Sparks. Now let's explore the field of archaeology in today's episode.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Dr. George Sparks, and this is Biblical Archaeology from the Ground Down. We got an exciting program for you today. We got a guest, Justin Robinson. Also, I have my co-host, Dr. David Graves, PhD, 30 years, field archaeologist, lots of experience, and this is going to be a lot of fun. Justin is a historian and an author. He works in the coin industry. Also, he's fellow of the Royal Numismatic Society, also a member of the British Numismatic Society. Justin is a contributor to Coin News, UK's biggest selling coin magazine. He enjoys working in the coin industry where he shares his passion for history, telling the story that brings the past to life. Justin has a saying. Wherever I see him on a podcast, this saying comes up, Justin. You know what it is. A coin without a story is just a piece of metal, but a coin with a story becomes history in your hands. Well said, sir.
Yeah, it's great.
He has also developed content for the British Society for the Turin Shroud. Now, this has a website, Shroud of Turin, one word, shroudofturin.uk, and we will put that in the content also. Right. Justin, welcome to the program. Hey, at this time, tell us a little bit about what got you into numismatics and what got you into comparing Byzantine coins with the Shroud of Turin.
Well, the interest in the Shroud of Turin came first when I was a very small boy, about 9 or 10. I remember seeing my mother reading a book, and the book had a very interesting photograph on the back. And I remember asking my mother what the book was about and what the photograph was on the back, and she told me. She said, if this book is correct, then what you're looking at there is a photograph of Christ. And I couldn't believe it. And I remember asking my mum if I could read the book after she'd finished with it, and she said yes. And it became the first grown-up book I think I'd ever read, and it was The Shroud of Turin by Ian Wilson. And I've actually got an original copy of it here. This was actually, I think my mother actually had the paperback of it, but that was the image that I saw. Sorry, that's the image that I saw, and it was incredible, absolutely incredible. So that was the first grown-up book I ever read. I then went on and I watched with my mother the documentary that was made around that time called The Silent Witness by David Rolfe, and that is absolutely fascinating, and that led me down a rabbit hole from which I've never really fully emerged. And I think what that did was inspire me with a fascination of history, which has obviously continued. I think the Shroud of Turin is an incredible artifact. It's where science and history and faith combine in one absolutely incredible, totally unlikely object. And for that reason, I find it quite fascinating. Interestingly enough, I went off to university. I studied history. I got a master's degree, and I lectured in history for a short while, and loved all of that. And then managed to have an opportunity to put my knowledge of history and fascination for history to good use. And I got involved in the coin industry, and became a historian for them. I work for a company today called Sam Lahuzit, one of the largest coin collecting companies in Europe. And they own, for example, the Mint of Norway, so they strike the Nobel Peace Prize each year. So I get the fun job of actually telling the stories behind the coins that the company is selling. So I'm in a very fortunate position. And a little while ago, just after joining the coin industry, I was presented with a Byzantine gold coin, the image on the shroud. So I've called it a gift from history, and it's basically my sort of personal investigation of the evidence surrounding the Shroud of Turin. So I hope it'll be of interest. Basically, I've asked myself 4 questions. What is the Shroud of Turin? Where has it been? How old is it? And how was the image made? So what is the Shroud of Turin? Well, it's a relatively simple one to answer. In Turin Cathedral, there's an ancient strip of linen cloth which defies all scientific explanation. It's very rarely displayed in public. It has been permanently kept in a purpose-built state-of-the-art conservation case since 1998. It's housed in an oxygen-free, primarily inert argon atmosphere so that no microorganisms can attack it. It also has 6-inch thick bulletproof glass, and it's temperature-controlled and air-conditioned case, which maintains optimum levels of temperature and humidity. And on the very rare occasions when the cloth is displayed in public, it isn't actually removed from this case. The case is simply tilted 90 degrees, so the cloth never has to be removed from its protective environment. Now, since 1898, the cloth has only been displayed to the public on 7 occasions. So it is a very rare, almost once in a generational occurrence to actually be able to see the shroud in person. I went to see it in 2010. There are some photographs that I took of the shroud when I was there. And as you can see, you can get very close to it. And one of the strange properties of the shroud that you realize almost immediately is that the closer you get to it, the more indistinct the image becomes. You actually get a much better view if you're actually set back from it at a distance, which is remarkable. But that's one of the strange properties of the shroud. Now, the blood-stained linen cloth bears the unmistakable full-body image, both front and back, of a man who bears the wounds associated with a Roman scourging and crucifixion. The cloth is believed to be the most scientifically studied object in the world, and yet every study inevitably raises more questions than it answers. And after decades of study, scientists are still unable to replicate the image, even with 21st century technology. So nobody knows for certain how the image came to be on the cloth, which is one of its most enduring mysteries. As I said, it is considered to be the most studied artifact in human history. And as you can see, it has a very lengthy association with the media as a consequence. It is a fact that there is much greater detail that can be observed when the image on the shroud is viewed as a photographic negative. And for many centuries, the faint outline on the linen cloth was the only way that people could view and interpret the image. But that changed with the invention of photography. And when viewed as a photographic negative, with light and dark reversed, hidden details could be seen clearly for the very first time. And we have this gentleman to thank for it. His name was Secondo Pia. And in May 1898, he was given the permission to actually photograph the shroud for the very first time after a public viewing. And it is said that he nearly dropped his plate in the dark room when he saw the details of the face on the negative image. And scientists, scholars, and theologians all conspired to accuse Pia of faking his results. And the poor man had to wait 35 years for the next public viewing before he could be vindicated. This is the image that Pia took. And as you can see, it's not a particularly clear one, but it shows the face with incredible detail for the very first time. And it was only when photographs of the full body image were taken in the 1930s that people could see for the first time how much detail had been hidden within the shroud. So this is what you see when you look at the shroud in its normal state. And you can see this slightly sort of yellowy with slightly darker yellow image front and back of the crucified man. But when you look at that as a negative, when light and dark are reversed, suddenly you get to see an awful lot more detail in the body, which I think is, again, just another remarkable feature of the cloth. The image shows an anatomically correct victim of Roman crucifixion. The wounds of the man on the shroud are consistent with the details of Christ's death as described in the New Testament. The body has suffered a brutal flogging with a 3-pronged Roman flagrum, and there has been a rough cap of thorns and a significant side wound through the ribs into the chest. There are also wounds through the wrists, which are anatomically correct, as only the wrists could support the weight of a body on the cross. So if we just have a look at the information here, we can see the injury of the wounds at the top of the head, consistent with a cap of thorns. We can see severe bloody abrasions on the shoulders, which are consistent with being forced to carry a heavy object. We can see a major wound in the side, consistent with a lance having pierced the chest cavity. Blood and water stains have also pooled around the small of the back. We can see evidence of a brutal flogging resulting in 120 wounds, consistent with having been inflicted by a multi-pronged Roman flagrum. We can see blood flow up both arms from wounds inflicted on the wrists, consistent with both arms being suspended above the head in a crucifixion position. We can see a wound on the wrist, consistent with crucifixion, and driving a nail through the wrist rather than the hand would fix the body to the cross. It would also sever the median nerve, causing the thumbs to turn inward, and it is significant and worth noting that there are no thumbs visible on either hand. And there are also bloodstains from the wounds inflicted on the heel, which again are consistent with a Roman crucifixion and the biblical description of Jesus's death upon the cross. So the images, the wounds on this crucified man correspond to the biblical accounts of the torture and crucifixion of Jesus of Nazareth. So we can see there just some verses, and again, I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but it's just to show basically that the evidence on the shroud is consistent with what the Gospels tell us happened. He was flogged, and we can actually see the back and legs of the man on the shroud show wounds that are consistent with a multi-pronged Roman flagrum, where metal balls or bone fragments would have been fixed to the prongs to rip and cut the flesh. And analysis of the wound direction shows that there were probably two floggers, one on either side. And when a replica flagrum is placed on the full-sized image, the wounds actually do line up, as you can see, with remarkable accuracy. Again, it's another very, very interesting feature of the wounds. Jesus, of course, was crucified. Unlike medieval painters who always depicted Christ on the cross with nails through the palms, the shroud accurately shows that the nails went through the wrist, the only place that could support the weight of a body hanging on a cross. And the internal damage to the median nerve would have made the thumb turn inwards. And as I've said, there are no thumbs visible on the shroud. Now, analysis of the blood flow along the arms show that they were actually suspended above the head as the blood flowed down. And there are two distinct angles of flow, suggesting that the man repeatedly pulled his body up to breathe. And the blood flow along the arms is so precise that scientists have even been able to plot how the man moved on the cross, and even calculate his position on the cross at the time of his death, which again is just remarkable, just looking at the angle of the arms and the way that the blood has flowed down them, giving scientists the opportunity to actually calculate the final position on the cross at the point of death. There are bloodstains on the feet, which show evidence of a wound through the heel area. And in 1968, we had some good solid archaeological evidence. The bone belonging to a man called Jehonan was discovered in a grave in Jerusalem. And like Jesus, he had also been put to death by crucifixion in the 1st century. And all that remained of his body was a fragment of heel bone, with the nail used in his crucifixion still sticking out of it. And it's the only physical evidence that we found to show how victims of a Roman crucifixion were executed. And it is consistent with the injury that we see on the shroud. There is also a substantial wound on the side, which is consistent with a sharp pointed object being thrust upward between the ribs into the chest cavity after the heart had stopped pumping. And there appears to be an elliptical wound above the main blood-stained region, which again is consistent with having had a spear thrust upwards through the ribs and into the chest. Blood and water have poured out from the open wound and pooled in the small of the back, when the body has been laid horizontally, as you can see. And there's just a note there just regarding sort of rigor mortis. A forensic inquiry of the shroud is actually put through. If a person is in complete rigor mortis, the only way to change the position of a limb or joint is to break the rigor, a term referring to the forcible bending of a limb at any joint. There is an indication that the man on the shroud was in a state of rigor mortis when placed on the shroud. The absence of the neck space in the front image and an elongated image on the back of the neck area is highly suggestive that the head was bent forward in rigor. The leg and the foot images are also highly suggestive of rigor mortis because the right calf shows a greater density than the left. The raised chest also suggests rigor. The left foot shows an imprint of only part of the heel, suggesting either a very slight bend at the left knee with the foot flexed slightly forward or a turning inward of the left foot over the right. Suggestion here is that the body was already in rigor when it was actually placed on the cloth. The blood on the shroud is human, and it comes from a victim of extreme torture. The fact that the blood is still showing red is evidence that the body that produced the blood underwent extreme torture before death. So when highlighted, the full extent of the blood that appears on the shroud can be seen obviously more clearly. And blood samples have been taken from the shroud and have been found to be real human blood from one man. The blood type is actually AB positive. The blood stains are not painted on, and the flow of blood is consistent with the scourging, the crown, cap of thorns, crucifixion, and a side wound. And the tests, and this always fascinates me, the tests have revealed that the blood was already on the linen cloth before the image formed, because no image appears under the blood. And you have to ask yourself, would a medieval forger put the blood stains on the cloth before creating the image? I mean, that would be almost impossible, if not completely impossible. The blood on the shroud is still red, and when a person is tortured for a long period of time, the body goes into anaphylactic shock, the cell walls of the red blood cell breaks down, and the liver floods the bloodstream with an enzyme called bilirubin, which keeps the blood looking red. And the blood on the shroud has been found to contain bilirubin, again suggesting that the shroud wrapped a body that had been subjected to extreme and prolonged torture. So again, this is all news which has obviously appeared in the press. There's an example there, the British Independent in 2017, Shroud of Turin stained with blood from torture victim finds researchers. So again, this is all evidence. Another fact is that the image on the shroud has astonishing three-dimensional properties. In 1976, scientists from NASA discovered that 3D information is present on the shroud image, which enables depth to be observed. And this is impossible in a conventional photograph. In 1976, they used a VP8 image analyzer, which was very sophisticated and expensive technology for the time. It was an analog computer, and it produced simulated 3D elevations from brightness maps, which were often called height fields. And it was used to analyze X-rays and other imaging data, and worked by converting image density, lights and darks, into vertical relief, shadows and highlights. So when scanned by the machine, a two-dimensional photograph does not produce a 3D effect because there is insufficient information on a standard image to determine depth. So the image that I can show you green there of a conventional two-dimensional photograph basically shows a bit of a mess. The image is distorted, the facial features are all squashed together. But a group of scientists in 1976 decided to test the new VP8 machine with a photograph of the shroud, and the results were astonishing. The team discovered that the photograph of the shroud produced a startling three-dimensional image in the correct proportions. Two researchers, Dr. Eric Jumper and Dr. John Jackson, decided to investigate further, and they created the Shroud of Turin Research Project, or STURP. And 2 years later, the team obtained permission to perform the first in-depth scientific examination of the mysterious cloth. In 2008, Dr. Petrus Soons, a 3D imaging expert, identified 3D information on the whole body image, and he was building very much on the pioneering work of the VP8 analyzer. He extracted the 3D information, and over 3 years, he used it to build a 3D digital hologram of the man on the shroud. And he was at great pains to stress that no imaging data had been created by the process. The 3D data has always been on the shroud, waiting for the technology to reveal it. But you see these rather astonishing sort of three-dimensional examination there of the man on the cloth. In 2010, a team of imaging experts led by an Emmy-winning graphic artist called Ray Downing used cutting-edge software to build a model of the face on the shroud to reveal what they believe the man looked like. And that formed a History Channel special called The Real Face of Jesus. And you can see the results of their work. In October 1978, an international team of scientists was given unprecedented access to the cloth for 5 days. So this is the Shroud of Turin Research Project, STURP. They brought with them 80 tons of scientific equipment with them to Turin to analyze the shroud. The scientists were invited to examine the cloth immediately after a public viewing to commemorate the 400th anniversary of the cloth coming to Turin. And they worked around the clock in shifts to make the best use of their time. And STURP conducted multiple tests on the shroud, and their primary goal was to establish how the image had been formed. They had no official sponsorship. The scientists funded their own activities. They also managed to arrange gifts and loans of technical equipment with a value of over $2 million. The group was made up of members of multiple scientific fields and diverse backgrounds, primarily from the United States and Europe. They included a nuclear physicist, a thermal chemist, a biophysicist, an optical physicist, a forensic pathologist, together with electrical power specialists and photographers. And they have continued their research after access to the shroud, and many have gone on to publish their results in scientific journals. In 1981, in its final report, Stirp wrote, "We can conclude for now that the shroud image is that of a real human form of a scourged, crucified man. It is not the product of an artist. The bloodstains are composed of hemoglobin and also give a positive test for serum albumin. The image is an ongoing mystery, and until further chemical studies are made, perhaps by this group of scientists or perhaps by some scientists in the future, their problem remains unsolved." So they were able to determine what the shroud wasn't, and that is, it wasn't the product of an artist, but they were unable to determine exactly how the image had been formed on the cloth.
Everybody, thank you for being with us. We appreciate that. Remember, if you haven't, like and subscribe. And if you know other people that are interested, bring them along as well. Justin, thank you for your time. David,
Very welcome.
appreciate all your work. Until then, everybody have a good week.